Thank you for joining us for our live webinar today on best practices and Whiz education. We've got folks from a lot of different states, and we're going to be try to be very respectful of your time but we do have a lot to cover. My name is Sherry Mayberry, and our trainer is Beth Smith. Just to let you know, during the webinar, in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you see a little tab that says questions. So if you click on that and you have a question during the webinar, you can type it in there, and we'll try to get to you. Either we'll share that question with everyone, or I'll try to respond back if it's something I can respond privately that we can deal with. Also, you'll notice 4 handouts. If you've had a chance to download those, great. You don't need them as we're going through the webinar, but they are great information, and Beth's also going to show you where they're located on our website. So if you don't get them right now, you can get them later. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Beth so we can get started.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know everyone has busy schedules, so we will keep this moving along. My name is Beth Smith. I'm one of the partners with Whiz Education, and today what we're going to do is we're going to talk a lot about the curriculum that we produce specifically designed for family child care. I noticed when I looked at the attendee report, we have a lot of folks out there who are not familiar with Whiz, and then we have some who are. We have some who have providers who are using the curriculum and some who don't. So I'm going to try to touch on all bases as I go through the highlights, I would say, in this hour that we have, because it's not a very long time. Last night, just so you know, we recorded and we did a webinar for providers. We do a lot of training at Whiz, and we record that so people can go back and listen at another time if they couldn't attend live. We do have some training webinars also that are part of the PD registry in Pennsylvania, and I'll show you when we go through the website where those live. You might want to go back and listen into the one we did last night for providers once it's posted, which I believe it already is. I'm going to ask Sherry to, at some point in the box, to type both my email address and hers in case you have questions after the webinar that you want to direct to us. My email is B as in boy, Smith at gwizeducation.com. And Sherry's is smayberry@gwizeducation.com, and I'll have her type those in so that if you would like to contact us, you certainly can do so. So with all that said, just a little bit of background about Whiz. Whiz started in 2012. We did a test market and talked to a lot of people in different positions, from providers to those that work with providers, about the need for something specific for family child care. And through a lot of test marketing and review of state standards, the Head Start standards, we came up with what we have today, which has gone through obviously many iterations until we got to where we are right now. And being a digital curriculum, meaning everything that we do lives on our website, and the provider downloads and can either print or not print depending on their preferences. It is super easy for us to add to our curriculum, to modify, to adapt based on new research in the field, feedback from providers, feedback from quality specialists. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the components that we've added recently, actually, based on that type of feedback and on best practices. So that's kind of where Whiz came from. I want to note at the get-go, we are not something that is in a box that is shipped to a provider that has things like popsicle sticks and paper plates. That is not us at all. We view Whiz as the foundation of a house. And when you build a house, majority of the time that foundation looks very similar. It's cinder block walls, or it's that new pumped concrete. But it needs to be strong. And so what we view Whiz as the foundation upon which a provider will build the house. So we get them started, but we are by no means the entire day. We are by no means everything that they will be doing with the children. We are just that foundation. And I'll show you what that looks like in the lesson plans and in our user's guide, how we go about that. So during this webinar, we're going to touch on a lot of things. We're going to go really quickly. I will stop to take questions as we go along. If you have questions, like Sherry said, please type them in the question box. If you're using a headset with your computer, or you've called in on your phone, we can try to unmute you if you would like to ask the question out loud. You will just need to click the raise your hand button. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you where some things are on our website. And one of the most important components, which is actually one of your handouts, is our user's guide. This is our training manual. It's an extensive book that has a lot of information in it for providers about things like individualization, anecdotal notes, reflections, assessment, the philosophy, developmental areas, and what we call our learning indicators, linguistic responsiveness, cultural responsiveness, disabilities. There's a lot of information in here. I could literally spend 2 hours just going through this user's guide with you. Obviously, we don't have that kind of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the document and highlight a few things, but just know this is one of the handouts that is available, but it's also always on our website under our products. And this is not a component you need to be a customer to access. I am not signed in as a customer right now, so anyone can access this at any time. So the documents that we use at GWiz, majority of them are PDF files. And when I do training with providers, I encourage them to save them to their computer and also back up to a flash drive, external hard drive, or if they use Gmail, like the cloud. They can also choose to print. That is their choice. When you're using digital products, you can make that decision as to whether you want to print it. So some providers will print this document as the training manual out and put it in a binder and keep it handy. Others will just download it to a folder on their computer and access it that way. It's their choice. So it just starts out with, as always, you would imagine, a table of contents, which talks about their role, individualization and authentic assessment, developmental areas and indicators, philosophy, research, and more, meeting the needs of all children in GWiz, and implementing the curriculum. Like I said, there's a couple of these areas we're going to highlight, and then the rest of it I would encourage you to take time to go back and look through because there is a ton of information in this book. This is a little bit about why we started GWiz. Like I mentioned, the biggest thing was that providers felt like there was not a curriculum for a mixed age group. And so when we decided to create GWiz, we were working very hard to include experiences for everything from babies to school age. And that's kind of what we do and how we're different than many other curriculums out there. We realized that providers don't have a lot of extra cash to spend on curriculum. They also needed it to be easy to use and interactive, which this is. And the biggest thing was meeting all those different ages in one curriculum because there's most of the time one of them. The activities and experiences are also designed to be used in a home and not in a center. We know that's a big difference as well. They may not have all the materials and equipment that a center may have, probably do not, but they have things in their house that they can use just as effectively. So for instance, a water table. In a center you might have a very expensive water table, but there's no reason you need to. You can buy an under the bed storage box and put water in that, put it on a table with a towel underneath it, and boom, you have a water table. So we use things they would have in their kitchen. We use bowls and plastic spoons and paper cups and paper plates and mixing bowls and cookie sheets and things that are just around the house that they should have on hand. And we try very hard not to have them going out and buying a lot of things or finding a lot of things because they don't have time for that either. Here's some testimonials. And then this one talks about their role. And I'm not going to spend time in here right now because we're going to talk about the environment in GWiz when we get into that booklet, the learning environment. So I'm going to skim through this. Just bear with me 1 second so I can go on to, and I'll talk about training as well at a different section. Individualization and authentic assessment. So with GWiz, we view anecdotal notes and observations as a critical part of the curriculum. And so this section explains to providers what an anecdotal note is. How do you write an anecdotal note? It gives them a tool that they can use for recording their anecdotal notes. And then it also gives them a tool that they can use to reflect upon those and then plan experiences. So this section walks them through that whole process, which we view as a 5-step process. So when they're doing experiences that they've planned or that we've planned, they're going to observe, then they're going to reflect on what they've observed. Then they're going to plan experiences based on those observations. They're going to do the experiences. They're going to reflect on how it went, and then they're going to do it all over again. It's a circle. So these next 2 pages explain that process to the providers about what each step entails so that they can have this as part of their daily experiences with children. It's very important for them to individualize what we're giving them. We do level experiences based on developmental levels, but they need to take it a step further. So this page explains what an anecdotal note is. I tell them when I do my training, it's like being behind a video camera. You're recording what you see, what you hear, not what you think you see, not what you think you hear, but actually what's going on, kind of just the facts, right? Only the facts. And then this explains what a reflection is. So then you take what you've observed, as you know, and you reflect upon it. And then that's what you use to plan the experiences. So this explains that whole process, and then it gives them some tools they can use. So I'm going a little too far. One of the tools that they can use, and I'm going to show you a bigger version of this, is our observe and reflect grid. That would be the printable that they could print out as many times as they wanted to record anecdotal notes and their reflections. The individualization web, we provide a blank one in this document, but with each unit we provide one that's customized to the unit, and it's a tool they can use to individualize each unit based on a child's interests, based on a child's special needs, based on a child's maybe an area they're working on or an area that they're really strong in, whatever the provider wants to do. It's a way for them, again, to individualize each unit. And then when I opened, I talked about how because we're digital, we can change at the drop of a hat. Well, this is one of those examples. This is a new component called our customized individualized lesson planning sheet. This came about from a provider in Ohio that was required to document how she was adapting and individualizing the GWIZ experiences. And she sent me an email. She's like, I'm writing all over my lesson plans. I just don't know how to do this. It's a hot mess. And I'm like, let me think about it. So I noodled it around for a little bit. And this is what I came up with. It's a multi-page document, and I'll show you what it looks in a bigger scale when we get to the actual unit. But basically what it is it has our unit here, the dates that it's being taught, the provider's name, and then across the top they have boxes to put the children's name. Each day we have our experiences listed here with blank space so that the provider can indicate how, for instance, they're adapting, let's say this is called read to learn, how they're adapting that experience for a child in their group. And it goes through the whole entire unit this way. So there's one of these for each of the units that we do. But this is just an example of how we've listened to our customers and listened to our quality specialists to help provide them with tools that they think that they feel would be very useful for them as they use the curriculum. Then this talks about putting it all together. You know, what do you do with the anecdotal notes? What do you do with the reflections? I mean, what is that? How does that work? So here's a sample of the observe and reflect grid that's blank. They can print this page out as many times as they want. Again, this is not a lockdown document. Anybody can access this to use for recording anecdotal notes and reflections. And then here's a sample so they kind of know what it should look like once they've completed it. Here's a blank individualization web. Remember, there's a one that's matches to each of the units itself, but this is a blank one. So if they're doing their own unit, they could use this one. And then it again gives them an example of what it might look like when it's filled out. And then something we get asked about all the time, and I'm just going to answer it right now, is about standardized assessments. We know that family child care providers, particularly those participating in QRS programs, must complete some type of a formal assessment on the children, whether that be ages and stages or gold or whatever it is in your area. We know that. So when we created GWIZ, I took a look at a lot of the standardized assessments, and then I created, when we looked at our 10 developmental areas for all the different ages, we figured, you know what, if we're covering all 10 developmental areas for all the different ages, it won't matter what formal assessment tool they use. Really, they can use any tool that they want, and they should pick one they feel like will work best for them and their children. And so far, from what we've been hearing from our quality specialists, that works really well. Like if they're using GWIZ and let's say they're using ages and stages, it works really well together because of that connection between the 10 developmental areas and the assessment tool. So this just talks a little bit about that. We also do provide developmental checklists that were developed by the CDC on our website, and that's for ages birth through 4 that providers can download and use if they need a developmental checklist. Um, so I'm going to stop just really quickly right now before I go on and see if there are any questions so far about anything I've covered regarding, how GWIS started, how we approach authentic assessment and formal assessment, and then I want to move into just very briefly what we call our learning indicators.
If you would like to ask the question and we can unmute you, we have one hand raised, Renee. So Renee, I'm going to try to unmute you and see if we can. Renee, hello? Renee, I know she's unmuted. So Renee, I'm sorry, we cannot hear you, but if you can type in your question, if that's the reason your hand is raised, I'll be glad to read it. Let me just check. Sometimes those hands get raised and you don't even realize you've done it. So anyway, so I don't have any questions. But if you
Okay.
do have them after Beth gets started again, just type it in.
Okay, perfect. This section I'm not going to spend a lot of time on with you all because you know about the 10 developmental areas, but I do want to highlight all the areas that are covered in the GWIS curriculum, and they are listed here in this graphic. Language development, physical development and health, literacy, social emotional, math, social studies, science, creative arts, logic and reasoning, and approaches to learning. In reviewing state standards from all over the country, including the Head Start performance outcomes, these were the ones that kept showing up over and over again. Sometimes with a little bit different iteration in terms of the wording, but basically they're all sort of covering the same thing. So this section of the user's guide is very helpful for providers because it explains what language development is, for instance, and what it looks like. And there are 10 different pages, one for each area of development. I am going to actually scroll through here very quickly because I want to get on to the section about our learning indicators. Those are going to be of more interest to you because this is content that you know. But again, this document is available to anybody, so you're welcome to use this with providers as you help them learn more about the 10 developmental areas. And sorry, I have to do that because my toolbar gets hidden behind GoToWebinar. So in the GWIS curriculum, we are covering those 10 developmental areas. What we do to help connect the dots is each area has a picture code. So I call this a speech bubble. So in the lesson plans, we use these picture codes to help providers connect the activities that they're doing to the developmental areas. And then we take it a step further in the back of each teaching guide, and we have a chart. And each chart has each experience, and then it has these specific skill areas that that particular activity addresses. So not only do they learn what developmental area they're addressing, but they also then connect the dots to the specific skills that that particular experience is addressing. And when we get in the lesson plans, I will show you exactly what that looks like. But these picture codes were designed to help make that connection. Now, these codes, what you're seeing right here, are also the same codes that you will see on our alignment charts to state standards. So we have alignment charts for all the different states, and it will show you your state standards and then how these align to them. And I'll show you where those charts are, by the way, when we get through this part. So I just wanted to highlight what those learning indicators are and the picture codes because they're going to come back again as we get into the lesson plans. This explains that whole section. We also do incorporate gross motor skill activities, have a get moving if it can be done or should be done outside, it has a sunshine. And then this is for character education. We actually build that right into every unit that we do, and we cover responsibility, respect, honesty, and kindness. Those are the 4 areas of character education. If you're in Florida, we know this is super important and just want to make sure that you're aware. So when you see this symbol, you know that the experience is addressing character education. The next section is all about the philosophy behind the curriculum and the research that supports it. So we have 4 philosophers that we built the curriculum upon. Piaget, Vygotsky, Slomansky, and Erickson are the 4. And then there are multiple pages here with a lot of research. This actually keeps updating, and changing. All right, because we know that research continues on in the field of early childhood education, and we know that there are a lot of agencies out there like the McCormick Center, the Erickson Institute, Mathematica, who are doing research specifically on family child care. So we keep up with that, and as we find studies that support what we're doing and how we're doing it, we add them to our research base. So you'll see lots of information here about the research behind why we do what we do and how we do it, and it's broken up by different areas. So that's, again, something that you can look through at your leisure. And it keeps going and going and going. This talks about developmentally appropriate practice. And then we get into the section about meeting the needs of all children. This section focuses on cultural responsiveness, linguistic responsiveness, disability, suspected delays, and special needs, and how providers can adapt, modify, individualize what GWIS is giving them and why that's important, because we know all of these areas are very, very important. So this explains what is cultural responsiveness. What does it mean for a program to be culturally responsive? We actually have one of our training videos that we have done called Exploring Diversity, again, open to anyone for free, that's available in our video gallery, and also I'll show you where on our YouTube channel, but that providers can watch and learn more about diversity. This talks about gathering information about families, particularly when they're new to your program. How do you incorporate cultural responsiveness into the curriculum? Here are some ideas to get you started. And then here's a printable that they could actually print out if they just wanted this one page of questions when they're enrolling new children to help them gain a better understanding of the families in their program. This is another printable that they're welcome to use about their weekend. So this is something that could be given on Friday that the parents or guardians return on Monday, or it could be something that parents or guardians fill out Monday morning, because we know Mondays can be crazy days, and if you don't know what that child experienced over the weekend, did they nap, did they not nap, did they go to bed late, did they have a cold, it's really hard to gauge how that Monday's going to go. So this is a tool to help providers communicate with families about how that weekend went, and it is available in both English and Spanish. So this is something they can print out and use whenever they would like, if they so chose. This talks about what linguistic responsiveness is. We know that in today's world, we have families speaking many different languages, and how do providers incorporate linguistic responsiveness into their curriculum? This talks about how to do that. Even things as simple as, well, what if you don't speak their home language? Helping them realize that Google Translate can be their friend, and that has the button that they can even push so that it will actually say it out loud. The importance of modeling language, of asking questions. We do mention DLL and ELL children in our lesson plans when we're talking about that, because actually what's very appropriate for toddlers and twos just learning English, if they're even English speaking, is also very appropriate for DLL, ELL children who may speak English as their second language. This talks about children with disabilities and suspected delays. We do have some disability fact sheets on our website under our FCC Tools tab. Gives them another place they can look for information as well. We use technology to help providers gain information, but we also build that same type of linkage into the curriculum to help them expose children to the concept that technology can be a great source of information. And then child to child and examining the environment. And this talks about curriculum adaptations and things that they might need to do or might want to do. And then this goes into implementing the curriculum, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time in. It goes about all the components and how you use them, but we're actually going to go into the lesson plans and into the components and look at them. Before we do that, though, I just want to see if there are any questions about anything I covered within the user's guide. I spend a lot of time in this guide when we do training with providers, obviously, but for you all, I think it's perfect to just kind of skim through it, because I don't want to spend too much time, and you can go through it in more detail when you on your own time.
I will look to see if anyone raised their hands, and we did get Renee's question, and so the response is out there. There are no hand raised, but if you have a question, just type it in. And like we said, there's a lot of material we're covering, but all of this so far is just free on the site. So No questions yet, Beth.
Okay, well, I'm going back to the homepage and now I'm actually going to sign in. So if you were a customer of GWiz using our curriculum, this is how you would get to the actual units. I'm going to click here and sign in, and hopefully I will remember my password. And it would look a little different when a provider signs in because I'm obviously considered a trainer. But now this tab, which was not here before, GWE customers, has appeared, and I'm going to go over here to this month's units. We actually have a step-by-step guide under the support tab under getting started with GWiz that walks them through this using screenshots. We just recently started posting a very short video at the beginning of each unit of each month when we post the units about what they're about, things they might want to gather, how to get prepared. But our first unit for January is Awesome Opposites. We have some components such as the family letter, the All About My Week report, the digital family notes, sometimes some of the other materials that are available in Spanish. At this time, we don't have any other languages, but we do have Spanish. But I'm going to go into the English files because I don't speak Spanish. So that would be not very helpful on my end. And what they will do is they will scroll down. You see all these pink buttons and each one says download. Each one of these is a component that's associated with this particular unit. So you have story props, you have a materials list, you have the review, you have add and enhance, you have letters and literacy, and it goes on and on. But right now what I'm going to do is go into the teacher's guide. And again, we would encourage them to save these to their computer and back them up. And their decision as to whether or not they want to print them or not is totally up to them. They can print them in color, they can print them in black and white, they can print them two-sided if their printer does that, or just one-sided, or they can just download them and view them on their computer because they are a PDF file. So each unit that we do starts out with an introduction, and it has anything that they need to know about ahead of time, like we're gonna have an opposite day where we want the children to wear their clothes either inside out or backwards. That's noted there so they can be prepared to let parents and guardians know. And then it has our table of contents. And there's always a reminder here of the picture codes and the connection to the 10 developmental areas, as well as these down here. So just to remind them what they mean in case they've forgotten. The next page is our 2-week planning grid. Some of our providers will actually print this out and post it so that parents and guardians know what's coming up for the 2 weeks. The school age experiences are listed down here. And then I'm actually going to scroll here ahead to day 4. So just bear with me 1 second. There are 10 days in each unit. So there's 2 units in a month, so that's 20 days. And like I said, we are the foundation and they're going to build upon this. So here we are on day 4, and we always have our unit name, our focus, and then this is a cumulative list. So if the provider chooses to do all the experiences that we've planned for the day, they will address all these developmental areas: language, physical development and health, approaches to learning, science, social emotional literacy, music, creative arts, and logic and reasoning. Okay, we have a health and safety tip every day. We have a teaching tip every day. In this case, it addresses character education. And we have a transition idea every day. This box over here is a box that is designed to help providers model language. And when I do training with the providers, I say, these are not words we want you to write on an index card or anything like that. We want you to use them in conversations with children. For instance, the word tempo. That might be a word that they maybe have never heard before, but if you're using it in context while you're playing a game where you're changing the tempo of the music from fast to slow, they'll understand what that means. And same thing down here. These are just more tips on how they can model language. We know that providers are being evaluated using either the environmental rating scale of class or the new Vickers, and I think it's Vickers 3, which is actually shipped on its way to me so I can look through there and see how we can help in that area. And we know that that's a big part of that, is those back and forth conversations, those open-ended questions that get children to think, the modeling of language. We know that all of that is part of what those environmental rating scales are looking for, and it's built right in here to the GWiz curriculum. So then we have our exploring together. We used to call it circle time, but we changed the name because it's not a time when it's completely teacher directed at all. It is more presentation of an idea, and then you're going to do some exploring, you're going to do some moving, you're going to do some hands-on. In this case, they're going to be doing a story, but then they're also going to be playing a game and dancing. So it's something very interactive. Anything in red is just something that a provider might need a little extra time. It's just kind of a heads up. You might need some extra time to gather this. But the other part of that is the first bullet point of every experience that we do always explains the why behind it. And I'll talk to providers about how, if you don't know why you're doing something, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. You need to have a goal. You need to have some type of a plan about why this is important for children. So if they do this experience, they're going to do language, social and emotional, physical development and health, science, literacy, music, creative arts, which in this case is movement, logic and reasoning, and approaches to learning. It's a get moving. They're going to be building gross motor. It's also character education. So this experience just walks them through what they're going to be doing. And like I said, they're going to play this game fast feet, slow feet. We give tips in here for younger, less verbal or DLL, ELL children. You can name these parts for them as they do their movements, so it's built right in again. These are the questions that they can ask that help to get the children thinking. For instance, what things do you think of that go fast? What about slow? When do you move quickly? Why do you think I am moving so quickly? Again, opening that door for those back and forth conversations that then she can build upon. All right. We oftentimes in this, especially if we're introducing a new concept, a new idea, we will say, well, what do you know about it? What would you like to learn about it? Where could we go find more information? So those things we built into there as well. So that's the beginning of the day. And then we have two what we call small group or center experiences. Now, again, a lot of these will be child directed where she's setting up the environment, but she's not really, or he's not really leading the experience in any way, shape, or form. But that does not mean that they should just be like on their phone. That means that, we want them asking questions, being involved, describing, especially for nonverbals or DLL, ELL children, their actions and the reactions, because that's a great way for them to build language skills. So in this one, it's called kick and roll, where they're going to have different types of balls, and they're going to incorporate the fast and the slow, but they're also going to build, eye hand, eye foot coordination. They're going to do self-regulation because they're going to have to follow some simple rules. And so we break this one apart because obviously you're going to have toddlers and twos that are not ready to kick a ball, but they could push a ball, or they could, bounce a ball. I mean, push it with their hands or move it around or even crawl and follow it, whatever's appropriate for them. The key there is just be sure to describe the ball's movement as these children push, roll, or attempt to kick them. Again, helping them to build language skills. But then the threes, fours, and more advanced preschoolers, they can take it in a different direction. They can compare and contrast kicking and rolling. Does one way make the balls move faster than the other? Why do they think this is? Again, we know that as part of those environmental rating scales that these are the types of things that you want to see providers doing, and so we build it right into the lessons. Over here, experimenting with movement. So again, using things they have around the house, baking sheets, or maybe they have some wooden boards that they can sand to make sure they're smooth, pieces of cardboard, or all three. And they can roll the vehicles down and experiment, like, okay, if they make the ramp steeper, what happens? If they make it less flatter, what happens? And again, engaging them in conversation. So they're leading the experience, but the provider is there to build upon what they're learning. And then we always have an infant experience. In this case, it's called speed bouncing. It has a song that you're going to bounce the infant up and down on your lap. Does that mean that, you might not have toddlers, threes, fours that want to join in? Absolutely not, but it's designed for infants. So every day we have an infant experience that's specific to them. Doesn't mean that others won't want to join in. It just means that it's designed for them. So that's one day of a GWiz lesson plan to give you an idea of how we do things. I want to pause right there and see if anybody has any questions I can answer about anything that I just touched on very quickly within this one day of a unit.
Give you a minute to get your thoughts or questions. And no, so far, no questions, which is
Okay.
great.
All right, I'll keep on going. So we go through 10 days like this, like I said, for each unit. And then after those 10 days, we get into our school age experiences. I'm going to scroll by these really quickly, but when we created GWiz, we did in our test market ask about school age experiences, and people overwhelmingly said, yes, please give me some school age experiences. So we put 6 of them after the 10 days that providers who have school age children can use. But if they don't have school age children, they don't want to use them, that's okay too. Each of these is designed to be extended for another day for numerous reasons. One, oftentimes these children have homework or other things they need to do after school. So they might not be able to complete an experience in one day. They might need more time. Two, they're older and they're able to start an activity one day and mentally carry it over to the next day. So they're able to do that. So each one of these school age experiences is going to take at least 2 days and could take even more. We have the same type of open-ended questions going here because we want the same exact back and forth conversations going on that we did with the younger children. So again, there's 6 of these. And then after that, we have our story props. Now, in the first unit of every month, we have an original story with props. These happen to be popsicle stick props. And this is a story about Mr. Opposite who gets things very mixed up. And every time he's supposed to do something like eat something hot, he chooses something cold. We encourage providers to actually make a second set of these props and put them in their language center so that children can retell the story who are more verbal in their own way. But the text for the story is here. The actual props would be a printable, and I'll show you where they are in a different file. And there's some extensions on how they could use these props in other ways. We have a provider in Florida who does all kinds of amazing things with these props. Like she just told us last night that she took the props for Mr. Opposite and made a video of it and changed her voice. And the kids were just so excited about that and thought it was so funny. So there's so many things they can do with it because it is printable and they can make the decision themselves. All right, so in the curriculum, we provide with each unit 2 make-it sheets. These are not color cut and paste. The goal behind these is to communicate between the program and the parents and guardians and carry the learning over from one place to the next. So in this case, one of the make-it sheets is a book. It is available in English and Spanish, where they would put the book together and then read it with the provider, and then take it home and read it with the parents or guardians. The second one is a game. They actually put these in a paper bag, and then they play a game related to the opposites, and they could take that game home and play it with the parents or guardians. These are totally optional. They are not written into the lesson plans in any way, shape, or form, so providers can choose whether or not they want to use them. They can also choose how many copies they need. So let's say they only have maybe one child who is ready to play this game about opposites, and they only print 1 copy out. That's the beauty, again, of being digital. You're not forced into buying for a certain number of children. You can just print what you need. These are for children who are getting ready to go to kindergarten. So more advanced children, there's creative writing here, there's more with letters and letter sounds. We integrate those things into the lesson plans themselves, but this takes it a step further, and more advanced math, like this is about addition and subtraction. And then here's that chart I mentioned. So remember when we looked in the user's guide, we saw these codes that correlate to a specific skill. This is how, let's say we looked at the kick and roll experience earlier. These are the specific skills that would be addressed if the provider did that experience kick and roll. So all the experiences in the GWIS curriculum in this particular unit are on this chart so they can see exactly what skills they're addressing, and the school age ones just fall over onto this page because there wasn't enough room. We give them a book list so that they can go to the library and get books that tie in with the unit or locate them from their own personal library. We also have original songs and poems, which we always most often put in the back. In this case, there's not any recipes, but if we were cooking, the recipe would be back here. If we had a teaching tool, like in our second unit, preparation directions for that would be back here. And then sometimes I just put back here things that would be helpful to save them time. So I know, for instance, we were doing a unit and talking about the farm, and we were playing a game about lost sheep. So I just gave them printable sheet of like 8 different sheep, and they could cut them apart, put them on plastic blocks and then hide them. So if there's things like that that I can give them to make their life easier and save them some time that could be used within a game, within an experience, then I will do that. Okay, so that's one teaching guide. Any questions about the teaching guides?
Don't hesitate to ask, or if afterwards, all of you should have our email addresses if you have questions after the webinar. But no, we have no questions.
Okay, perfect. So for instance, here's the story props for Mr. Opposite. So all they would need to do again is click it. It's a PDF. They could print it out. This would be one prop they would definitely need to print because they're going to use it to tell the story. The materials list is simply a chart. There's 3 pages to this. Anything in red is something that just needs a little bit of extra time to prepare. The things that are not in red should be things they have on hand or have already prepared. And then on the last page of this, if there's anything they need to let parents or guardians know, it would be here. If there's things they might need to purchase or might need a little more time to, like crepe paper screamers, they may have them, they may not have them, but or rhythm band instruments, maybe they can borrow them. Those would be listed right there. So there's one of these materials lists for every unit just to save them some time. The provider's review is a sheet that they complete at the end of the unit about how the unit went. If they did it again, what would they do differently? What were the children's favorite experiences? What didn't really click with them? Because it's very important for them to take a step back and think about how things went. The add and enhance is yet another component that came about because of a provider. This one in New York City, she is an accredited provider and said, look, I really need some guidance on what materials I can add to my different activity centers based on the unit to enhance the environment. Again, part of the whole environmental assessment. So this is divided up into 6 areas: art, dramatic play, dress up, blocks, literacy and writing, gross motor play and music movement, and manipulative science and math. There's one of these for each unit. So the provider has some ideas of other materials they can add to the different areas that will enhance the unit. Literacy and letters is another new component. This component was added for those children who are ready developmentally to talk more about letters, letter sounds, sentences and words, punctuation, anything related to literacy. We just started doing this in the fall, and what we do is we take the experiences. So for instance, wow, that's hot on page 6, and we talk about letters that they can incorporate into that particular activity for those children who are ready. And in some cases, it might be, as that one says, many other letters. So it's a meaningful way for them to expose the children to letters that is not a ditto sheet, that is not tracing a letter, that is not, you know, isolation. It's within the context like that one, a soft spot. We're going to talk about the letter S. So there's 2 pages of experiences that can be incorporated into the activities for those children who are developmentally ready to do so. Here's the customized individualized planning form that I showed you earlier that was teeny tiny. So this is for awesome opposites. So here again, they would put the children's names across the top. And on day 1, these are the experiences we have planned, and they could write in these boxes how they're going to adapt for each of the individual children if they need to adapt. We have this available as a Word document as well. So if they want to type on the form, they would use this one if they have Word on their computer. The All About My Week report, which is available in English and Spanish, goes home on Friday. It's a way for the provider to communicate with parents and guardians about how the week went, where they spent a lot of their time, what they're learning hard to do, what they're getting very good at. And then I always encourage them, once they've filled this out, to make a copy and put it in the child's portfolio or file, because it's a running record throughout the year, every week, of, you know, what their interests are, you know, what they're learning how to do, and it gives you a really interesting picture over the course of the year of where they've been. Again, available in English and Spanish. This is the family letter, and because it is digital, it can just be emailed to a parent. It does not need to be printed out if they don't want to. It has an overview, the concepts, and then ideas of things they can do at bath time, meal time, when they're out and about, and at bedtime. And then we always have a song or a rhyme at the bottom that they can do. That was one that we've introduced during the unit, and then they can reinforce at home. This is available in English and Spanish. The only difference would be sometimes with the song, because we lose the rhyme, or if it's a rhyme, I will change that up to a chant or something different for the Spanish version so that it makes more sense. The individualization web we saw in the user's guide, and that's the one where they can individualize this unit, in this case, awesome opposites, based on the interest, the needs, the delay of each child. The digital family notes, think of this like a picture on your camera roll on your phone. It can be texted to parents or guardians. It can be emailed to parents or guardians. They could, of course, print it if they so chose, but it's a very simple thing that they can do at home to reinforce the unit. And there are 2 of those. Those are also available in English and Spanish. And then the make it sheets we saw within the teaching guide. So that would have been the book and also the game that they're going to play with the paper bag. So this is just one unit. This is the awesome opposite unit for January. If I go back out of here and I scroll down a little bit further, I'm going to see our second unit, which is up in the sky. It'd be the same format. We have English files and we have Spanish files. The only difference here is instead of a story in the second unit, we have a teaching tool, which is like a manipulative. So it could be pattern strips and cards. It could be a lotto game. It could be a lot of different things. And then we also have a printable puppet that ties in with the unit that introduces new ideas and new concepts. But other than that, all the other components are the same. The teacher's guide with the 10 days of lesson plans, the materials list, the all about my week reports, the add and enhance, the letters and literacy, all those other components remain the same in the second unit, it's just those couple that change out. Okay, does anybody have any questions about any of the components that are included in the GWIZ curriculum that I covered as I went through them very quickly?
Nothing right now. We do have, no, there are no other questions.
Okay, great. So what I want to do is I want to go back to the home, because as part of what we do at GWIZ is training. And we have something called the GWIZ cohort where we do free training every month. We just did one on the intro to GWIZ, but we've done numerous webinars on different topics. So if you go under the support tab, there's information about the cohort here, but over here, if you go under this tab, you can see the ones that we have done. So we have Making Math Meaningful, an overview of GWIZ, the why behind experiences, exploring diversity, exploring language. And the links to the recordings are here, as well as a link to a post-assessment. In order for a provider to access the certificate of attendance, they have to watch the video and then do the post-assessment, or they will not be able to get to it. But this page will continue to grow. We just started posting all these cohort videos this fall, so it's something that we're going to keep doing throughout the year. And like I said, if you happen to be in Pennsylvania, we are in the PD registry there. So for instance, the diversity, Making Math Meaningful, the why behind experiences, the recordings are all up in the PD registry where providers can watch them, and then they also get their hours in Pennsylvania. Under Why GWIZ is a very important page for you as quality specialists. A lot of what I've covered and talked about is available here. We do a digital catalog to Save a Tree that is a PDF that you are more than welcome to download, save, and share with providers via email or however you would like. Here's information about our training cohort. Here's the user's guide. And then this is another guide that I did not go into yet, but it's about parent involvement, family engagement, and the curriculum and how it all goes together. So that's another piece. Again, you don't have to be a customer to access, and you're welcome to share with providers. We have also our learning environment in GWIZ. This talks a lot about the providers and their important role in the whole everything they do, the back and forth communication, things as simple as just put your phone down. Also let parents and guardians know your rules regarding returning text messages and emails, so you're not on your phone and feel like you need to be all the time and you can be present. Things you can add to the environment, things you can do to make the environment engaging for children, that's all in this booklet. And then this is something brand new that just came about via Pennsylvania, actually. This is a utilization checklist because we've been asked, okay, so I have providers using GWIZ, how do I know they're actually using the curriculum? Great question. So what this document does is it gives you things that you can observe. And the first thing, so do you observe them using the teaching guide? Do you observe the children actively involved and like are exploring together, or are they just sitting there? Do you see a mix of experiences? You can make notes. Then do you hear? Is the provider asking those open-ended questions? Are there back and forth conversations? If there are, you know they're utilizing the curriculum. Questions you can ask. What activities from this unit have the children enjoyed so far? What materials did you add to your learning centers to enhance the current unit? So these are all things you can ask providers. And then here's a checklist that you can print out for a provider who's using GWhiz and say, hey, have you seen all these things like the user's guide, the training webinars, the parent involvement, the learning? And if not, the links are right there. They're hot links. If you give it to them as a PDF file, they should be able just to click on it and it'll take them right to those documents, because these are all very important resources that if a provider is using GWhiz, they should have an awareness of and be utilizing as they use the curriculum. So again, all of these documents that I just went through are under a special tab just for you, which is the YGWhiz tab. We are also going to be putting the recording of this webinar here under this tab. And I'm also, after the webinar is over, I have a follow-up form that then if you need a certificate of attendance that says you were part of this webinar, that you'll be able to print out for yourself. So after the webinar is over, just give me a short period of time. Once the report downloads, I will email everyone that link that was on the webinar so that they can print that out for themselves if they need it for their records. Under FCC tools, we have a ton of free materials for providers. We believe in supporting them in any way we can. So there's lots of information. Here's a flyer to help parents learn about how children learn about letters and letter sounds, because we know they get asked that all the time. A weather chart. Here's a sample daily schedule. And then the second part of the sample daily schedule, if I scroll down, there's one that is completed, but there's also one that follows it that is blank, so they can write in their own schedule. So you can look around under this tab. Everything that you find here is available to anyone, whether they're a customer or not. So I'm going to go back to the home page because I want to show you where your state standard alignment charts are. So I'm going to scroll down here. And oh, before I do, here's the pricing. I always forget to go over this. One of the things we were very cognizant of, again, was limited budget. So GWhiz is an economical choice at $18.95 a month, $53.95 a quarter, or $192.95 a year. And that is not a per child price. That is a per provider price. So one provider up to 12 children making up to 12 copies of anything like the family letter, for instance. We wanted this to be a reasonable price that they could fit into their budgets. And then here's where you would go for your state standards. You would click here, find your state standard, and then it'll be a PDF file that you can look at if you would like, that aligns to the standards in your state. So with all that said, at 12:53, I am going to stop talking and see if we have any questions. If you would like to ask a question out loud, and again, if you're using a headset or you're using your phone, we can try to unmute you if you raise your hand, or you're welcome to type the question into the question box and Sherry will relay it and I will do my best to answer it.
We try really hard to have this under 1 hour. You've done a good job. You're right at 1 hour. If you have a question after we're through, please don't hesitate to send it to us with the emails that I've already provided. And I'm pretty sure Beth covered this, but when we do have other webinars for our providers, if you would like to have a PDF that you could send to the providers you work with, that they could attend a training just for them, which is free, we'd be glad to give that to you and let you email it to the providers that you work with. And I don't see any questions. So again, we want to thank you for taking time today. There is the recording that we'll be posting afterwards. And if there's no other questions, I guess you guys go have a great day.
Right, and like I said, look for an email from me shortly, which will have the link to the Google form where you can then get the Train the Trainer certificate to print out for yourself. It'll just be a short while. We have to download the attendee report, and then after that downloads, I can email everybody. So if it doesn't show up in your inbox by tomorrow, you have my email. Just shoot me an email and say, hey, I didn't get it, and I'll make sure that I get it to you. But I thank you all for attending. I know that your days are packed full from morning until night. So thank you for taking an hour to spend with us. If you think of any questions after the fact, like Sherry said, our emails are there. Just shoot us an email. We're happy to help in any way we can. And have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.